Hello everyone, in this video we are going to discuss how to crush the Petrov defense with the white pieces. Petrov defense is considered one of the most solid chess opening to play with the black pieces against your 1e4. So it's going to be extremely fun to simply crush this powerful chess opening, the Petrov defense. So I don't want to waste any further time, so let's quickly jump into the video. So we are playing with the white pieces and we start the game with 1e4. And our opponent plays the move e5. We play knight f3, and here at the place of playing the move knight to c6, our opponent plays the move knight to f6, re-attacking the pawn on e4. So here the most common move is to simply capture the e5 pawn. Black plays d6, we go back, and then black captures the pawn back. The reason is, if the black captures it instantly, we can simply play the move queen e2, and after knight f6, we can play the move knight c6, and it's a check and black's queen is dead, so we are going to win the game. So that's the reason, at the place of playing the move knight into e5, which is the most popular and the most common way to play, we are going to play the move d4 in this position. After d4, our idea is that we are hitting the pawn on e5 with 2 times, and our idea is to capture the e5 pawn with the pawn. So after d4, black is having 2 ways to continue the position: knight into e4 and e into d4. First, let's try to discuss what happens if e into d4 is played. After e into d4, we are going to push the pawn to e5, hitting the knight. Knight goes to e4, which is the best move in the position. We play the move queen to e2. Here, another move can be to simply capture the pawn on d4, and the line is d5 and the game continues. But again, we want to basically take our opponent to the territory where he's not really prepared and we are the ones prepared. So that's the reason after knight e4, we play the move queen to e2, attacking the knight on e4. So after queen to e2, black is having 2 ways to continue the possession: knight c5, moving the knight, or to play the move bishop to b4 check. So here, what happens after knight c5? After knight c5, we are simply going to capture the d4 pawn. And the small difference in this position here is, we are having a powerful pawn on e5. So basically after knight into d4, black plays knight c6. We develop the bishop via e3. Black captures the knight. Black cannot recapture the pawn on e5 because here we can simply play the move f4 in this position. And after a move like maybe simply, let's take knight c6, we can already capture this knight, and after pawn takes, bishop into knight, it's a check, black is a piece down, and we are going to win the game. That's the reason knight into d4 is the most principled move in the position. We capture the knight back, knight to e6, attacking the bishop, bishop to e3, d6, we capture the pawn, bishop takes, knight c3, short castle, and here we do long castle. So what's happening in this position? Material wise, it's an even position, but both the sides have done the opposite side castle. So bishop d7, we can play g3. Our idea is to develop the bishop to via g2. Black plays bishop c6 indeed, but here we can simply play the move knight to d5. And here, after the next move queen d7, bishop g2, rook d8, our idea is to play the move rook to e1. And after rook h to e1, our idea is pretty clear. We want to play the move king to b1, queen to c4, and the move f4. And white is extremely comfortable in this position, and whereas black is a bit passive in this position, having cozy pieces. So that's the reason white is extremely comfortable in this position, and it's easy to play with the white pieces. So that's exactly what happens if the opponent plays the move knight to c5. So now let's try to discuss what happens if black plays the move bishop to b4 check. After bishop b4 check, we will play knight d2, double attacking the knight. So knight will take the knight, bishop takes, queen takes. And here, if black plays something like castle, we can simply capture the pawn on d4. And because of a strong pawn on e5, white is having a very pleasant position. That's the reason black is forced to protect the pawn via c5. We do a long castle, short castle, and here we play the move queen to f5, trying to use our queen into the game. After queen f4, black develops naturally via knight c6, and here we already play the move bishop to d3. So what's the idea in this position? After bishop d3, our idea is already to capture on h7. For example, if black continues the game via knight to b4, our idea is already to sacrifice the bishop, king takes, and knight to g5 check. And I'm pretty sure that everyone watching the video knows this theme, because after knight g5 check, black is having two ways. If king g6, h4, h5 is coming up, and the game is over for black. So the king is forced to go backwards, but now simply queen h4, threatening mate. So here, the best option for black is to capture the pawn, king b1, knight to c3 check, and after takes, queen to b6 check, king c1, queen g6, which is extremely hard to find. And after queen g6, we can even play the move rook d3. Rook g3 is coming up, and black is going to really face some heavy troubles in the position, and white is again very comfortable and better in this position. So this is exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move knight to b4. So if the opponent plays the move like h6, which makes the most sense, if g6, I'm not sure after queen h6 how black is going to stop the move knight g5 and checkmate. That's the reason h6 was the most sensible move in the position. But after h6, our idea is pretty clear. g4. Our idea is to play the move g5. After g4, black plays knight b4. We play the move g5. And already, because the bishop is extremely strong, black would like to take the bishop. We take the knight, h5. Because if black tries to open up the position, it will only favor white in the position. So after h5, we play the move knight to d2. What's the reason? What's the idea? The idea is to simply sit on these holes, which are very weak. So that's the idea. So after knight to d2, b6, the idea is to play bishop b7. We play the move knight to e4. And here, if move like bishop b7, already knight f6 check, pawn takes, and after queen g5 is actually unstoppable, followed by queen g7 mate, and white is completely winning the position. So going back a bit, in this position, if black tries to play the move g6, we can play the move rook g1, bishop b7, and already knight f6 check, king g7, and again sacrificing the knight. Pawn takes, rook h3, attacking the pawn, so rook h8, and now a very strong move, queen to f5. The idea is to play g6, which is actually unstoppable. So after bishop c6, g6, pawn push, rook h5, takes, queen h5 is coming up, queen h7, and even if queen h8, we can simply take the pawn, queen g5 check, push the pawn, and queen f6 is coming, even queen h4 is coming, the game is over. Completely winning position for white. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move bishop to b4 check after knight d2. So that's all happens if black tries to capture the pawn on d4. So finally we are going to discuss the main line, which is what happens after knight into e4. After knight into e4, we are going to play the move bishop to d3, attacking the knight. The main move is d5, and here we simply capture the pawn with the knight. Knight to d7, idea is pretty clear. Black wants to trade off the knight. And here as a place of trading, we are going to play the move knight to c3. After knight to c3, black is having two options to capture this knight or to capture this knight. If black captures knight into c3, we capture it. Knight into e5, d into e5. So what's the idea in this position? Black is thinking white is having these bad pawn structure isolated pawn on c3 and c2, and black can take advantage of it. But after d into e5, white is having extremely strong pawn on e5. So after d into e5, bishop to c5, short castle, and here we are already going to strike via queen h5. What is the idea? We are threatening mate in 1. So here black must play the move g6, because h6 leads to an immediate game over in the position via bishop h6, gh6, queen h6, and queen h7 is unstoppable. If you try to play f5, I can simply capture y and pass, and the game is over. So that's the reason you must play g6. And after g6, white plays queen h6. The idea is to play the move bishop g5. So black plays rook e8, which makes the best sense. Black wants to play the move bishop to f8. So here we play the move bishop to g5. Here black is having two options, bishop e7 or bishop f8. If bishop f8, we can simply capture the queen. Bishop takes and bishop into pawn. And white is a pawn up in this position. So here, bishop d7, maybe. we can play rook b1, trying to attack the b7 pawn. And here, if bishop c6, white can happily play the move f4, and white is extremely happy in this position, better in this position, pawn up in this position. White is having no issue. So that's the whole point. Black must play the move b6 in the position, but now we can already play bishop a6, covering the c8 square. Whereafter bishop c6, because bishop b7 was a strong move in the position, so bishop c6, bishop to d6, and you can just relax in this position, because in the worst scenario, it is going to be a draw because you're already a pawn up. Black is having the d5 weaknesses. You can play the move f4, trying to protect the e5 pawn. White is extremely happy in this position. I know definitely the c3 and c2 pawn are weak, but it can't really be captured so easily. So you can already relax in the position. There is no way you are going to lose this position. So this is exactly what happens if your opponent tries to play the move bishop to f8 in the position. If your opponent tries to play the move bishop e7, after bishop e7, we can already capture the bishop, queen into e7, and play the move f4 in the position. After f4, our intentions are pretty clear. We want to play the move f5. For example, black plays c6, and now we can already play f5. And you can't really capture the e5 pawn because of f6, and it's a fourth mate. So bishop into f5 is a fourth move. Bishop f5, gf5, rook f5. And I think there is no need for further explanation. It's already completely winning for white because black's king side is extremely destroyed. So this is what happens if your opponent plays the move knight into c3. So now let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent captures the knight on e5. After knight into e5, we capture d into e5. After d into e5, now black plays the move bishop to b4. Because here, if black tries to capture the knight, it will only transpose the position, which we simply discussed. So bishop to b4 is what we are going to discuss. After bishop b4, black's idea is to simply double attack the knight. Here, we are simply going to ignore the threat and simply going to short castle. Knight c3, pawn c3, bishop into c3. And after rook b1, black is saying that he is a pawn up. Indeed, he is. After rook b1, black castle, because black cannot capture the second pawn this time, because after rook e1, f4 is coming up and black is going to lose a piece. That's the reason black castle. And after short castle, we can already capture on the pawn on h7, king h7, queen d3 check, followed by capturing the bishop, rook e8, and simply playing the move queen to g3. Now what's the idea? After queen g3, black plays queen e7, which looks very logical, double attack the pawn. Because the bishop is kind of paralyzed, because the b7 is always hanging whenever the bishop moves. So after queen e7, double attacking the pawn, we play the move bishop h6, threatening mate in 1. Again, black is having two options to continue in this position, f6 or queen f8. If black plays queen f8, we can play bishop g5. Now bishop f6 is coming up. So after something like b6, because we cannot move the bishop because the b7 is hanging. So after b6, bishop f6, bishop f5, f4. Rook e6, rook b3. Now what's the idea, you ask? Queen g5, rook g3. It's unstoppable. White is completely winning in the position. So this is what happens if queen f8. So finally, let's try to discuss what happens after f6. After f6, rook to b4. Very strong move. You cannot capture the rook because it's a mate in 1. So if you try to capture the pawn, rook h4 this time. And now what's the idea? If black plays something like c6, rook h5. And now rook g5 is unstoppable. Triple attack, and you can't really protect the g7 pawn anymore. White is completely winning. So after rook h4, black must play the move queen f7 in order to cover the h5 square. But this time, f4. You can't capture because after rook into f4, I guess the game is going to be over for black. So black must push the pawn. But here's simply f5. And now f6 is coming up. You can't stop it. It's completely winning position for white. So yeah, this is how you can simply crush the Petrov defense with the white pieces. I'm pretty sure that whenever in the upcoming future, whenever you are going to face the Petrov defense, you are going to play this particular variation, because it will simply make your opponent helpless against this opening, and you can simply easily crush your opponent and score a full point. So if this video helped you to improve your knowledge and skill, then make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel, because It's free for you, but it helps us to motivate to make videos like this. So if you want any particular video in any particular topic, make sure to comment down in the comment box below. I'm going to make the video out of it. So I'm going to see you soon. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.